She was 8.5 months pregnant, sitting in a courtroom, wearing the only professional dress she still owned. Her husband had canceled her health insurance. He had locked her out of her own home. He had moved his 29-year-old girlfriend into the master bedroom and let that woman wear her dead mother's pearl necklace on Instagram. He had served her divorce papers at her own baby shower in front of 20 women from her church. He was offering her a leaky cottage and $3,500 a month out of a $2.1 billion empire. He told the court she was nothing, a housewife, a burden, a woman who had never contributed a single dollar to his success. And for 6 months, it looked like he was going to win. But here's what Rick Mercer did not know. Here's what nobody knew, except one retired old lawyer on a quiet island with a fireproof box full of documents older than the state of Georgia. The ground his company was built on, every dock, every warehouse, every square foot of his billion-dollar port, belonged to her family. It had belonged to her family since 1742, and the lease that let him operate there had one condition: stay married to a Beaumont, or lose everything. He filed for divorce. She let him, and then the ground opened up beneath him. Lesson and value. This story carries a truth that everyone needs to hear. Silence is not weakness, patience is not surrender, and the quietest person in the room may be the one holding the deed to the ground you are standing on. If you have ever been underestimated, dismissed, or made to feel invisible, this story is for you. It is proof that knowing your worth, protecting your roots, and refusing to break under pressure is the most powerful thing a person can do. If this story gave you chills, if it made you think of someone who needs to hear it, do me a small favor. Hit that like button. It takes 1 second, but it tells the algorithm to share this story with more people who need it. Drop a comment and tell me, was Catherine's revenge justice or was it too harsh? I read every single comment and I love hearing what you think. And if you are not subscribed yet, now is the time. We post stories like this every week. Tales of betrayal, courage, and the kind of justice that money cannot buy. Hit subscribe, ring that notification bell, and I promise you, the next story will hit even harder. The courtroom was silent, not the comfortable silence of a pause between words, but the suffocating silence of 30 people holding their breath at the same time. Rick Mercer stood at the petitioner's table in his $4,000 Navy suit, the one he wore when he wanted to intimidate people. His hands were flat on the table. His knuckles were white. His lawyer had stopped talking mid-sentence, which was remarkable because Marcus Whitfield charged $800 an hour and never stopped talking. At the other table sat a woman in a simple navy dress. She was visibly pregnant, her hands resting on her belly like she was protecting something precious from the chaos around her. She had not spoken a single word in 45 minutes. She did not need to. The document the judge was reading was doing all the talking for her. Judge Patricia Harden looked up from the paper. She removed her reading glasses slowly, the way people do when they need a moment to decide whether to be furious or fascinated. "Mr. Mercer," the judge said, "I'm going to ask you a very simple question, and I need you to think carefully before you answer." Rick opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "Do you know who owns the ground your company is built on?" 6 months earlier, Rick Mercer was the most powerful man in Savannah, Georgia. He had the money. He had the lawyers. He had the plan. His wife had nothing, or so he thought. This is the story of how a quiet woman, a 280-year-old piece of paper, and a $2.1 billion lie brought the king of the port to his knees. Rick Mercer stood on the balcony of his penthouse overlooking the Savannah River and watched the container ships crawl toward the port like obedient metal whales. Each one carried his name, not literally, of course, But every ship that docked at Terminal East, every container that was unloaded by crane, every truck that rolled out of the port gates toward Interstate 16 carried money that eventually found its way into Rick Mercer's pocket. At 54 years old, Rick was the CEO and majority shareholder of Mercer Atlantic Logistics, a company valued at $2.1 billion. He controlled the largest private terminal operation on the eastern seaboard. He employed 4,000 people. He had a penthouse in Savannah, a beach house in Sea Island, a condo in Manhattan that he used maybe twice a year, and a wife he had not thought about in approximately 3 weeks. That wife was Catherine. Rick picked up his phone and dialed Marcus Whitfield. Marcus answered on the first ring because when Rick Mercer called, you answered on the first ring. "Tell me it is done," Rick said. "Papers are drafted," Marcus said. His voice had the smooth confidence of a man who destroyed families for a living and slept perfectly fine afterward. "We are offering the Tybee cottage, $3,500 a month, for 5 years and nothing else. The prenup is airtight. She signed it in '98. She gets what the paper says she gets." "And the pregnancy?" There was a pause on the line. "Rick, about the pregnancy, my advice is to not challenge paternity unless you are certain. If the DNA comes back yours, you look vindictive in front of the judge. And judges in Chatham County do not like vindictive. She is 48 years old, Marcus. 48. You think, I believe that baby is mine? I think it does not matter what you believe. I think it matters what the judge believes." Rick took a long sip of bourbon. The ice clinked against the crystal. Below him, the river caught the last light of the sun and turned the color of copper. "Serve her at the baby shower," Rick said. Marcus went quiet. Even for a man who had built his reputation on ruthlessness, this gave him pause. "Rick, that is a room full of women, church women, her friends. If this gets out, it looks cruel." "It is cruel," Rick said. "That is the point. She needs to understand that there is no room for negotiation. She needs to understand that fighting me is pointless. You serve her in front of everyone, and she will be so humiliated she will sign whatever I put in front of her just to make the staring stop." "And the paternity challenge?" "Include it. I want her to know that I do not just want the money. I want her to know that everything she thought was solid, the marriage, the baby, the future, is sand, and I am the tide." Rick hung up and finished his bourbon. He poured another. He thought about Catherine, not with guilt, not with nostalgia. He thought about her, the way you think about a car you are trading in. He tried to remember the last time she had surprised him, the last time she had said something that made him turn his head. He could not think of a single instance. 26 years of marriage. And the woman was wallpaper. She planned charity events. She maintained the garden. She had conversations with the neighbors about bird feeders and book clubs. She visited her father's grave in Bonaventure Cemetery every Sunday and left fresh magnolias on the headstone. She was, in Rick's estimation, the most boring woman in the state of Georgia. What Rick did not know, because Rick had never bothered to ask, was that Catherine's father, Judge William Beaumont, had not been just any judge. He had been the last active steward of the Beaumont Family Trust, a legal entity that had existed since 1742 and controlled something far more valuable than Rick's stock portfolio. But we will get to that. For now, Rick was thinking about Skylar. Skylar Voss was 29. She was the vice president of communications at Mercer Atlantic, which meant she controlled the company's public image, wrote Rick's speeches, and managed the social media accounts that made Rick look like a visionary instead of what he actually was, which was a man who had figured out that ports make money and had married into the right piece of dirt to build one. Skylar was everything Catherine was not. She was loud. She was strategic. She photographed well. She had the kind of ambition that Rick found intoxicating because it mirrored his own. She did not care about magnolias or bird feeders. She cared about equity and access and getting her name on things. Rick had been sleeping with Skylar for 3 years. He had been planning to leave Catherine for 2. The pregnancy had accelerated his timeline, but not in the direction Catherine had hoped. In Rick's mind, the pregnancy was not a reason to stay. It was a reason to leave faster, before the courts could use a newborn to complicate his financial exit. He texted Skylar, "Papers go out Saturday. Baby shower. It will be done by Christmas." Skylar replied with 3 words. "About damn time," Rick smiled. He set his phone down and looked out at the port, his ships, his empire. He had no idea that the ground beneath all of it belonged to the woman he was about to throw away. And here is something worth knowing, because this detail matters more than Rick ever understood. 2 weeks before the baby shower, Rick had called his insurance broker and canceled Catherine's health coverage. He did not tell her. He framed it internally as a cost-saving measure, shifting her off the company plan before the divorce made it legally complicated. But the truth was simpler and uglier than that. He wanted her to feel the ground shift. He wanted her to go to her next doctor's appointment and feel the specific terror of being told your card does not work. She was 5 months pregnant, high risk, 48 years old with elevated blood pressure, and a doctor who had told her, in no uncertain terms, that stress could end this pregnancy. Rick knew all of this. He canceled the insurance anyway. If you are married and your spouse controls the health insurance, you need to know right now, today, what plan you are on, whose name it is under, and what happens if that coverage disappears. Do not wait until you are sitting in a parking lot outside a doctor's office trying to figure out how to pay for a sonogram. Know your coverage, because the person you trust with your health today may not be the person you can trust with it tomorrow. Catherine found out about the insurance at her next OB appointment. The receptionist pulled her aside quietly and told her the policy had been terminated. Catherine sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes, staring at the steering wheel, trying to calculate how much a high-risk pregnancy cost out of pocket. She did not call Rick. She did not scream. She called Medicaid. And she started, for the first time in 26 years, to realize that the man she married was not just neglectful. He was methodical. Saturday came wrapped in the kind of golden Savannah morning that made everything look like a postcard. The Spanish moss hung low and lazy from the live oaks. The air smelled like jasmine and warm grass. It was the kind of day where nothing bad was supposed to happen. Dolores Washington, who everyone called Dee, had spent 2 days preparing her house for Catherine's baby shower. Dee was 62 years old, retired from 30 years as a clerk in the Chatham County Family Court, and possessed the kind of personality that could fill a football stadium. She was Catherine's neighbor, her closest friend, and the only person in Catherine's life who had never been afraid to tell her the truth. Dee's house was a 3-bedroom cottage on a tree-lined street in the historic district. She had hung pink and white streamers from the porch. She had ordered a cake shaped like a pair of tiny baby booties. She had set up folding chairs in the living room and put fresh flowers on every surface. 20 women arrived throughout the morning. Church friends, garden club members, neighbors who had known Catherine for decades. They brought gifts wrapped in pastel paper and stories about their own pregnancies and the kind of generous, uncomplicated love that women give each other when one of them is about to become a mother. Catherine arrived at 11. She was showing now 5 months along and she moved with the careful deliberateness of a woman who was aware that her body was doing something miraculous and terrifying at the same time. She wore a white cotton dress with small blue flowers on it. She had done her hair, which Dee noticed, because Catherine only did her hair when she was trying to convince herself that everything was fine. "Girl, you look beautiful," Dee said, hugging her at the door. "Thank you, Dee. This is too much. You did not have to do all this." "I did not have to. I wanted to. There is a difference. Now get inside and eat a deviled egg before Martha Richardson eats all of them. That woman has no self-control at a buffet table." Catherine laughed. It was a real laugh, the kind that comes from the belly and makes your eyes crinkle. Dee held on to the sound of that laugh because she would not hear it again for a long time. The shower was going beautifully. Catherine opened gifts, a hand-knitted blanket from the woman who ran the yarn shop on Broughton Street, a set of organic baby wash from her doctor's wife, a children's Bible from the church pastor's wife, with a note inside that said, "For the little one, may she have her mother's grace." Catherine held each gift like it was made of glass. She said, "Thank you," with the earnestness of a woman who had not been treated gently in a long time and was overwhelmed by the kindness. Dee was in the kitchen refilling the punch bowl when she saw a young man walk through the front gate. He was wearing a polo shirt and khakis. He was carrying a manila envelope. He looked uncomfortable. Dee set the punch bowl down. She had worked in family court for 30 years. She knew what a process server looked like the way a farmer knows what a storm cloud looks like. She moved toward the front door, but she was not fast enough. The young man walked through the living room. 20 women went silent. He walked directly to Catherine, who was sitting in the chair of honor with a half-opened gift in her lap. "Catherine Mercer?" he asked. "Yes." He held out the envelope. "You have been served?" Catherine took the envelope. Her fingers did not tremble yet. That would come in a moment. She opened the flap and pulled out the papers. The room was completely silent. 20 women watched Catherine's eyes move across the first page. They watched the color drain from her face like someone had pulled a plug. Dissolution of marriage. Petitioner. Richard Allen Mercer. Grounds. Irretrievable breakdown. Catherine turned to the second page. The financial terms. The Tybee cottage. $3,500 a month for 5 years, nothing else. Out of a $2.1 billion empire, her husband was offering her a leaky cottage and pocket change. Then she saw the addendum, the paternity challenge. Rick was formally requesting DNA testing and stating in legal documents, filed with the court, that he did not believe the baby she was carrying was his. The water glass in Catherine's hand slipped. It hit the hardwood floor and shattered. The sound was sharp and final, like a period at the end of a sentence. No one moved. Dee was there in 3 steps. She caught Catherine's arm before she could bend down to pick up the glass. "Do not touch it," Dee said firmly. "Leave the glass. Look at me. Breathe." Catherine looked at Dee. Her eyes were dry, but her face had the expression of someone who has just been told the floor they are standing on is not real. "He sent them here," Catherine whispered. "He sent them to my baby shower. I know, honey. He does not think the baby is his. He knows the baby is his. He is trying to break you. That is a different thing." Catherine looked around the room. 20 women stared back at her. Some had tears in their eyes. Some looked angry. Martha Richardson, who was 74 and had survived 2 bad husbands of her own, was gripping her purse strap like she was preparing to use it as a weapon. Catherine stood up. She straightened her dress. She placed the papers on the chair and walked to the front door with the dignity of a woman who refused to fall apart in front of an audience. She made it to Dee's front porch before her legs gave out. She sat on the steps and put her face in her hands. Dee sat beside her. She did not say anything. She just put her arm around Catherine's shoulders and held her while the baby shower continued without them, the sounds of awkward conversation drifting through the screen door like music from another world. "What am I going to do?" Catherine asked. "Right now? You're going to breathe. Then you are going to eat something because that baby needs food, even if you do not feel like eating. And then tomorrow, we are going to find you a lawyer." "I cannot afford a lawyer. He canceled my credit cards last week. I have $2,200 in my savings account." Dee's jaw tightened. "He canceled your cards? And my health insurance. While you are pregnant?" "While I am pregnant." Dee was quiet for a long time. Then she said very softly, "That man has no idea what is coming for him." Catherine shook her head. "He has all the money, Dee, all the lawyers, all the power. What could possibly be coming for him?" Dee did not answer that question. She did not know the answer yet, but she knew with the certainty of a woman who had spent 30 years watching the worst people in Savannah walk into family court thinking they were untouchable, that the universe has a way of correcting an imbalance. It just takes time. 3 days after the baby shower, Catherine drove to the Savannah mansion to collect her things. She needed her prenatal vitamins. She needed her winter clothes. She needed her mother's jewelry box, the one with the pearl necklace her mother had worn on her wedding day, and the small gold locket that held a photograph of Catherine's father as a young man. She pulled up to the gate at 10 in the morning. She entered the code she had used for 20 years. The keypad beeped red. Access denied. She tried again. Red again. A security guard she had never seen before walked toward her car. He was young, maybe 25, built like a linebacker, and wearing a uniform that said Premier Security Solutions on the chest. "Ma'am, I cannot let you in." "I live here," Catherine said. "I am Catherine Mercer." "I know who you are, ma'am. Mr. Mercer changed the access codes and the authorized entry list." "Your name is not on it." Catherine stared at the guard. She could see the house through the iron gate. The lights were on. The landscapers had been there recently because the hedges were freshly trimmed. Everything looked exactly the same as it had for 20 years, except now she was on the wrong side of the gate. Then she looked up at the second floor, the master bedroom window, and she saw a silhouette. A woman, tall, thin, moving casually past the glass like she belonged there, Skylar. Catherine felt something crack inside her chest. It was not her heart. Her heart had been cracking slowly for years, and she had gotten used to the sound. This was something else. This was the crack of reality, the moment when the truth you have been avoiding finally sits down in front of you and refuses to leave. She picked up her phone and called Rick. He answered on the third ring. "What?" he said. Not "what do you need?" Not hello, just what. "Rick, I need my things. My medication is inside, my prenatal vitamins, my mother's jewelry. I will have someone box up whatever is yours and send it to the cottage. Do not come to the house again, Catherine. It upsets Skylar." Catherine gripped the steering wheel. "It upsets Skylar." You heard me. "Rick, that is my home. I have lived there for 20 years. It is my home. My name is on the deed. My money paid for it. You are welcome to the Tybee cottage. That was always your style anyway, small and quiet." He hung up. Catherine sat in her car, outside the gate, for 20 minutes. The security guard watched her from his post, but said nothing. He looked embarrassed, the way people look when they know they are participating in something wrong, but do not have the power to stop it. She did not cry. She wanted to. She could feel the tears right there behind her eyes, pressing forward like a crowd behind a locked door, but she did not let them through. Because she knew with a bone-deep instinct that if she started crying in front of this gate, she might not stop. Her phone rang. D. "Where are you? I have been calling for an hour." "I am outside my house," Catherine said. Her voice was flat. "I cannot get in. He changed the codes. There is a security guard, and there is a woman inside." The pause on Dee's end lasted exactly 2 seconds. Then Dee said, in a voice that could have cut through concrete, "You come to my house right now. I have your vitamins because I picked some up yesterday just in case. I have a guest room with clean sheets, and I have a baseball bat in the hall closet if that man shows his face on my property." Catherine almost smiled. Almost. She drove to Dee's house. Dee was standing on the porch when she arrived, arms crossed, wearing a house dress and an expression that suggested she was mentally composing a strongly worded letter to someone. "Come inside," Dee said. "I made chamomile tea, and while the water was boiling, I looked up the cost of a good divorce lawyer in Chatham County." "How much?" "The tea was cheaper, but the lawyer will be more satisfying." Catherine sat at Dee's kitchen table. She wrapped her hands around the warm mug and stared at the steam. "He put her in our house, Dee. I know. He put her in our bedroom. I know, honey. He does not even have the decency to wait until the divorce is final. He just replaced me, like changing a light bulb." Dee sat down across from her. She reached over and took Catherine's hand. "Catherine Beaumont Mercer, you listen to me. That man did not replace you. You cannot replace something irreplaceable. What he did was make space for something cheaper because he does not know the difference." Catherine looked at Dee. Her eyes were wet now, but still holding. "I have nothing, Dee. No money, no house, no insurance. I am 48 years old and pregnant, and my husband just told me I upset his girlfriend. What am I supposed to do? First, you are going to stop saying you have nothing. You have me. You have that baby. And you have your name, which I am starting to think is worth a whole lot more than you realize." "What do you mean?" Dee hesitated. She was thinking about something. A memory. A conversation from years ago with Catherine's father, Judge Beaumont, at a neighborhood barbecue. The old judge had been drinking sweet tea and watching Catherine and Rick from across the yard. He had turned to Dee and said something strange. "If anything ever happens to my girl," the judge had said, "tell her to call Henry. She will know who I mean." Dee had never understood that sentence. She had filed it away the way you file away things that old people say that seem important, but do not make sense yet. Now, sitting across from Catherine in the kitchen, watching the strongest woman she knew try not to fall apart, Dee thought maybe she was beginning to understand. "Never mind," Dee said. "We will figure it out. Right now, drink your tea. Tomorrow we fight." The call came at 2:14 in the morning on a Tuesday. Catherine woke up in Dee's guest room with a sharp pain in her lower abdomen. It was not the dull ache she had grown accustomed to over the past weeks, the background hum of a body under stress. This was different. This was a fist closing inside her. She pulled back the covers and saw blood on the sheets. "Dee," she called out. Her voice cracked. "Dee, something is wrong." Dee was in the room in 30 seconds. She took one look at the sheets and picked up her phone. 911. I need an ambulance at 417 East Charlton Street. Pregnant woman, 48 years old, high-risk pregnancy, bleeding. Yes, she is conscious. Please hurry. The ambulance arrived in 9 minutes. Catherine was on a stretcher in 11. Dee rode with her, holding her hand and talking to her in a low, steady voice the entire way. "You are going to be fine. The baby is going to be fine. You just hold on." At Memorial Health, the doctors moved fast. Catherine was taken to the high-risk obstetric unit. A monitor was attached to her belly, and for 10 terrible minutes, the room was silent while the nurse searched for the baby's heartbeat. Then it came, a fast, rhythmic thumping. Catherine exhaled a sound that was half sob, half prayer. "There she is," the nurse said, smiling. "Strong heartbeat. She is hanging in there." The doctor came in 20 minutes later. Dr. Ayanna Foster, a maternal fetal medicine specialist, who had the calm demeanor of someone who dealt with emergencies for a living and the direct communication style of someone who did not believe in sugarcoating. "Catherine, your blood pressure is dangerously high. The bleeding was caused by a partial placental abruption, likely triggered by sustained stress. I am being very honest with you. If your stress levels do not decrease significantly, we are looking at preterm labor. What do I need to do?" "Bed rest. Monitoring. No emotional upheaval. I need your body to believe it is safe, even if your life is telling it otherwise." Catherine nodded. She stared at the ceiling. The fluorescent lights buzzed. Then the nurse came back in. She looked uncomfortable. "Mrs. Mercer, I am so sorry. I need to talk to you about your insurance." "What about it?" "It is showing as terminated in our system. We can absolutely continue emergency care. That is not an issue. But for the ongoing monitoring program, the bed rest protocol, the follow-up appointments, those would need to be covered." "How much is the monitoring program?" $14,000. Catherine had $2,200 in her savings account. She closed her eyes. Dee, who had been standing in the corner trying to be invisible, stepped forward. "Is there a payment plan? Is there Medicaid? What are the options?" "We can connect you with our financial counselor in the morning," the nurse said. "There are programs. It just takes time to process." Time? Catherine did not have time. She had a baby pressing against a damaged placenta and a husband who had canceled her insurance while she was pregnant. After the nurse left, Catherine did something she did not want to do. Something Dee begged her not to do. She called Rick. He answered on the fourth ring. His voice was groggy. It was 3 in the morning. "Catherine, do you know what time it is?" "Rick, I am at Memorial. The baby is in danger. There are complications. The doctor says I need monitoring, but my insurance is canceled, and I cannot—" "Catherine." His voice sharpened. "My lawyer told me not to talk to you directly. Whatever you need, tell Marcus. I am not talking to your lawyer at 3 in the morning about our child's life. I am talking to you, your wife, the mother of your baby. If it is my baby." Catherine's hand tightened on the phone. "You know it is yours, Rick." "I do not know anything until the DNA test says so. Call Marcus in the morning, and do not call this number again." Click. Catherine placed the phone on the bed. She stared at the ceiling. The monitor beeped steadily, marking her baby's heartbeat like a tiny clock counting down. Dee pulled a chair next to the bed and sat down. She did not say anything about the phone call. She did not say, "I told you not to call." She just sat there. "He wants me to break," Catherine whispered. "I know. And I think it is working." Dee was quiet for a long time. Then she leaned forward. "Catherine, you listen to me. You are not going to break. You know why? Because that baby cannot afford for you to break. She needs you to be her foundation right now. Everything else, the money, the house, that worthless man, all of that is noise. The only real thing in your life right now is that heartbeat on that monitor. You hear it?" Catherine listened. Thump, thump, thump. Fast and sure and alive. "That is your daughter telling you to hold on. So you hold on. If you are going through a divorce and your spouse controls the finances, here is what you need to know. In most states, you can file an emergency motion for temporary spousal support. The court can order your spouse to maintain your health insurance, provide living expenses, and keep the financial status quo while the divorce is pending. You do not have to wait until the final hearing. You do not have to beg. The law provides a mechanism for exactly this situation. Catherine did not know this yet, but she was about to meet someone who did. Dee made calls the next morning. She called every legal aid office in Chatham County. She called the Georgia Legal Services Program. She called a woman she knew from her years working at the courthouse, a paralegal named Rosa, who knew every family law attorney in the city. Rosa came through. She connected Catherine with a legal aid attorney named James Park, who specialized in emergency family court motions. James was overworked, underpaid, and genuinely angry when he heard the details of Catherine's case. Within 72 hours, James filed an emergency motion for temporary spousal support and insurance reinstatement. The hearing was set for the following Monday. Rick's lawyer, Marcus Whitfield, showed up expecting a formality. He brought a junior associate and a binder full of prenuptial documentation. He did not bring any humility. Judge Harden read the motion. She looked at the medical records. She looked at the insurance cancellation date. She looked at Catherine, who was sitting in a wheelchair because her doctor had forbidden her from walking more than 50 steps. "Mr. Whitfield," the judge said, "your client canceled his pregnant wife's health insurance. Is that correct?" "My client made a financial decision regarding his company benefit plan that— Is that correct?" Marcus paused. "Yes, Your Honor. And your client is aware that Georgia law requires the maintenance of the status quo on health benefits during a pending divorce?" "We were not yet in a pending divorce at the time of the cancellation, Your Honor. The papers had not been served." "The papers were served 4 days later, Mr. Whitfield. 4 days. Your client canceled the insurance on a Tuesday and served the papers on a Saturday. Are you telling me that was a coincidence?" Marcus did not answer. The judge granted the motion. Rick was ordered to pay $8,000 per month in temporary support, reinstate Catherine's health insurance immediately, and maintain the status quo on all marital assets pending the final hearing. Catherine cried in the courthouse hallway. Dee held her and said, "See, the system works when you make it work." For 2 weeks, things stabilized. The insurance was reinstated. Catherine got the monitoring she needed. The baby's heartbeat stayed strong. The bleeding stopped. Catherine was moved from the hospital to bed rest at Dee's house, where Dee enforced the doctor's orders with military precision. "You're not getting up to do the dishes. You're not getting up to fold laundry. You're getting up to use the bathroom, and that is it. I have been waiting 62 years for a valid excuse to boss someone around in my own house, and you are not taking this from me." Catherine smiled. A real smile. For the first time in weeks, she felt like maybe she would survive this. Then the counter motion arrived. Marcus Whitfield filed it on a Wednesday afternoon. It was 12 pages long and constructed with the precision of a man who destroyed people for a living and considered it an art form. The motion argued that Catherine and Rick's marriage was potentially void. The basis was a discrepancy between Catherine's marriage certificate, which listed her maiden name as Beaumont, and her birth certificate, which listed her name as Beaumont Leclerc, a hyphenated version that included her mother's French family name. It was a technicality, a desperate, grasping, bottom-of-the-barrel technicality. But Marcus Whitfield knew that technicalities did not need to be valid to be effective. They just needed to create delay. The judge had to schedule a hearing on the challenge. In the meantime, the temporary support order was frozen pending review. The insurance company, seeing an active dispute over the marriage's validity, placed a hold on Catherine's claims. Catherine was back to zero. Everything she had fought for, the support, the insurance, the stability, was suspended in legal limbo while Rick's army of lawyers argued about a hyphen. She sat on Dee's couch with the legal documents in her lap, staring at the wall. "He is never going to stop," Catherine said. "Every time I take a step forward, he kicks the ground out from under me." Dee sat down next to her. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Cat, do you remember your father?" "Of course." "Do you remember what he used to say at those neighborhood barbecues? When he would sit in that lawn chair with his sweet tea and watch the world go by?" Catherine smiled faintly. "He said a lot of things. He told me something once. It was the year before he passed. He was watching you and Rick across the yard, and he turned to me and said, 'If anything ever happens to my girl, tell her to call Henry. She will know who I mean.'" Catherine went very still. "Henry," she whispered. "Who is Henry, Catherine?" Catherine stared at the floor for a long time. Then she looked up, and Dee saw something in her eyes that had not been there before. Not hope, exactly. Something deeper. Recognition. "Henry Calloway," Catherine said. "He was my father's oldest friend, a land title attorney. He is retired now, lives on Skidaway Island." "A land title attorney? What does land have to do with your divorce?" Catherine shook her head slowly. "I do not know. My father tried to tell me something once, years ago, about the family trust. He said it was important. He said I needed to understand the history, but Rick was there, and Rick told him to stop boring everyone with old Beaumont family nonsense. My father never brought it up again." Dee leaned forward. "Call Henry." Henry Calloway lived in a small clapboard house on Skidaway Island surrounded by live oaks and filing cabinets. The filing cabinets were the important part. There were 14 of them, arranged in 2 rows in what should have been a living room, each one labeled with dates going back to the 1700s. Henry was 70 years old. He had thick white hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and the careful posture of a man who had spent his life reading fine print. He had been a land title attorney for 45 years, specializing in the peculiar tangle of property law that existed in coastal Georgia, where Spanish colonial grants, British charters, and American deeds overlapped like layers of old paint on an ancient wall. He had been Judge Beaumont's closest friend for 30 years. He had been waiting for this phone call for 3. Catherine and Dee arrived on a Thursday morning. Henry met them at the door with coffee and an expression that was equal parts sadness and anticipation. "Catherine," he said, taking both her hands, "you look just like your mother. Please sit down. We have a lot to talk about." They sat at his kitchen table. Henry placed a fireproof lockbox between them. It was old, heavy, and secured with a combinations lock. "Before I open this," Henry said, "I need to ask you something. How much do you know about the Beaumont family history?" "Very little," Catherine admitted. "My father tried to tell me, but Rick always dismissed it as irrelevant. Old family stories, dusty history." Henry nodded slowly. "Rick dismissed it because Rick never understood it. And your father, God rest him, made the mistake of assuming that Rick's ignorance was harmless. It was not." He opened the lockbox. Inside, wrapped in acid-free tissue paper, were 3 documents. The first was a land survey, hand-drawn on heavy paper, dated 1742. It showed the coastal marshland around the Savannah River with precise measurements and notations in both English and Spanish. The second was a formal land grant, written in elaborate script on parchment, bearing the seal of the colony of Georgia under the Oglethorpe Charter. It granted 4,200 acres of tidal marshland, port access land, and riverfront property to one Francois Beaumont and his direct descendants in perpetuity. The third was the trust document, updated most recently in 2003, establishing the Beaumont Family Trust as the legal holder of the original grant land and specifying the terms under which the land could be leased to commercial entities. Henry let Catherine read each document in silence. Dee peered over her shoulder, her eyes getting wider with each page. "Catherine," Henry said, "the land your husband's company is built on, Terminal East, the dry docks, the Mercer Atlantic headquarters, the warehousing district, all of it sits on Beaumont family land. It has been Beaumont family land since before Georgia was a state." Catherine looked up. "That is impossible. Rick owns that land. He has the deed." "Rick has a ground lease, a 99-year ground lease, signed in 2003 that allows Mercer Atlantic Logistics to operate on Beaumont Trust land. Your father structured the lease himself. He included a specific clause." Henry put on his reading glasses and opened the trust document to a marked page. Section 12, paragraph C. "The lease shall remain valid and in force so long as the lessee or the lessee's principal maintains a domestic union in good faith with a member of the Beaumont bloodline. In the event that said domestic union is dissolved, or in the event that the lessee is found to have breached the good faith covenant through infidelity or abandonment, the lease shall terminate, and all reversionary interest shall return to the Beaumont family trust." The kitchen was silent except for the ticking of a clock on the wall. "My father put that clause in the lease," Catherine said slowly. "He did. He told me he hoped it would never matter. He hoped Rick would be a good husband. But your father was a judge, Catherine. He spent his career watching powerful men behave badly. He wanted to make sure that if Rick ever tried to discard you, the ground would discard him right back." Catherine sat back in her chair. She put her hands on her belly. The baby kicked, as if offering her own opinion on the matter. "So if we divorce," Catherine said, "the lease terminates. Rick loses the right to operate on the land. His ships have nowhere to dock. His headquarters sits on property he does not own. His $2.1 billion company becomes a fleet of boats without a port." Dee, who had been uncharacteristically silent for the past 10 minutes, finally spoke. "Lord have mercy." Henry smiled for the first time. "Your father also told me something else, Catherine. He said that when the time came, I should remind you of what the Beaumont family motto has been for 280 years. What is it? The land remembers." Catherine stared at the documents on the table. She thought about the baby shower. She thought about the locked gate. She thought about the hospital. She thought about the blood on the sheets and the insurance that was not there, and the man who had told her on the phone at 3 in the morning that he did not believe their baby was his. "Henry," she said, "what do I need to do?" "You need to do nothing yet. The lease is triggered by the divorce. As long as you are still married, Rick has the right to operate, but the moment the divorce is final, the clock starts. And the back rent?" Henry raised an eyebrow. "You are sharper than Rick ever gave you credit for. Yes, the lease contains a good faith covenant. If that covenant is breached through infidelity, the trust can retroactively assess commercial rent for the period of the breach. Based on Mercer Atlantic's public revenue filings, 3 years of back rent at 12% of gross income amounts to approximately $78 million. Catherine closed her eyes. She breathed in slowly. She breathed out. "I do not want to destroy him, Henry. You do not have to. You just have to let the law do what it was designed to do. My father designed this. Your father protected you the only way a judge knows how. With paperwork." Catherine opened her eyes. She looked at Dee. Dee was grinning. "I knew I liked your daddy." Rick, meanwhile, was living in a reality that was about to expire, but he did not know it yet. He had moved Schuyler into the mansion 3 weeks after locking Catherine out. Schuyler redecorated the master bedroom in 48 hours, replacing Catherine's antique quilt with a geometric duvet cover and tossing Catherine's books into boxes that she shoved into the garage. She turned the guest room into a home office. She hung her PR awards on the wall where Catherine's family photographs used to be. Rick watched all of this with the satisfied detachment of a man remodeling a house. Out with the old, in with the new. But Rick needed something else to feel complete. He needed his son. Ethan Mercer was 22, a senior at the University of Georgia in Athens. He was studying environmental science, which Rick considered a useless degree, and he had his mother's quiet temperament, which Rick considered a personality flaw. But Ethan was still his son, and Rick wanted him on his side. Rick called Ethan and laid the groundwork the way he laid groundwork for business deals, with selective information and strategic omission. "Your mother is not well, Ethan. I did not want to worry you, but she has been behaving erratically. The pregnancy is making things worse. I tried to help her, but she refused. She is living with that neighbor woman now. I think she needs professional help." Ethan, who loved both his parents and wanted to believe neither was lying, was confused. "Dad, Mom sounded fine when I talked to her last week. She is good at hiding it. Just be careful, son. I do not want you to get caught in the middle of this." It was masterful manipulation. Rick did not ask Ethan to choose sides. He just planted seeds of doubt and let them grow. But Catherine had one advantage Rick did not anticipate. She had the truth. She called Ethan and asked him to come home for Thanksgiving. "Come to Dee's house," she said. "See for yourself." Ethan flew home. He walked into Dee's kitchen on Thanksgiving morning and found his mother standing at the counter, 7 months pregnant, peeling sweet potatoes. She was wearing an apron over a maternity dress. She looked tired but sane. She looked like his mom. "Hi, baby," Catherine said and opened her arms. Ethan hugged her carefully, mindful of her belly. He pulled back and looked at her. "Mom, he told me you were making the pregnancy up, that you were not, really. He said you needed help." Catherine placed her hand on her very visible, very real pregnant belly. "Does this look made up to you?" Ethan's face crumbled. "I am so sorry. I should have come sooner. I should have called more. You are here now. That is what matters." Dee appeared with a platter of a cornbread. "Baby, sit down and eat something. We have enough food to feed the entire senior class at UGA, and I am not letting it go to waste." It was a small Thanksgiving, just the three of them at Dee's dining table, with turkey and sweet potatoes and green beans and pecan pie, and a gratitude that was fragile but real. Ethan told stories about his classes. Dee told stories about the most ridiculous cases she had seen in family court. Catherine laughed and ate and felt, for a few hours, like a person instead of a problem. Then Rick called Ethan. Ethan stepped onto the porch to take the call. Catherine watched through the window. She could not hear the words, but she could see her son's posture change, the way his shoulders tightened and his head dropped. He came back inside. He looked sick. "What did he say?" Catherine asked. "He said if I spend Thanksgiving with you, he is cutting my tuition. He said, I can explain to UGA why I am dropping out in my senior year." The table went silent. Dee set down her fork very carefully, the way a person sets down a loaded weapon. Catherine looked at her son. She saw the fear in his eyes, not fear of his father, but fear of losing everything he had worked for. 1 semester away from graduation. 1 semester. "Go back to him, sweetheart," Catherine said. Her voice was steady. "Finish school. I will be okay." "Mom, no. I am not going to—" "Ethan." She reached across the table and took his hand. "Your education is not a bargaining chip. Do not let him make it one. Go back, graduate, and then you will be free." Ethan left an hour later. Catherine watched his car pull out of Dee's driveway and disappear around the corner. She stood on the porch in the dark for a long time, one hand on the railing, one hand on her belly. Dee came out and stood beside her. She did not say anything. She just held Catherine's hand. Sometimes the cruelest thing a person can do is not hit you or scream at you or lock you out of your own house. Sometimes the cruelest thing is to take the people you love and use them as weapons against you. In the weeks that followed Thanksgiving, 3 things happened in rapid succession. Any one of them alone would have been manageable. Together, they were a demolition. First, Catherine's car was repossessed. It was in Rick's name. She came out of Dee's house one morning to find a tow truck driver hooking up the sedan she had driven for 6 years. She stood in the driveway in her bathrobe, 8 months pregnant, watching her only transportation being dragged away like a dog on a leash. Dee drove her everywhere after that. Dee's car was a 15-year-old Honda with a check engine light that had been on since the Obama administration, but it ran, and Dee was willing to drive it. Second, Rick's lawyer sent a letter to Catherine's church, Grace Community Church, where Catherine had been a member for 20 years, where she had led the women's ministry, where she had organized the food drive every December. The letter expressed Rick's concern about Catherine's mental health and requested that the church limit her involvement in activities for her own well-being. The pastor, a gentle man who avoided conflict the way some people avoid spicy food, quietly removed Catherine from the ministry leadership. She found out on Sunday morning when she showed up to lead the women's meeting and someone else was standing at the podium. No one would look her in the eye. She walked out of the church, 8 months pregnant, into the parking lot, alone. Third, this was the one that broke something. Skylar posted a photograph on Instagram. She was standing in the foyer of the Savannah mansion, wearing a red dress and high heels, and around her neck, Catherine's mother's pearl necklace, the one Catherine could not retrieve when she was locked out, the one that had been in her family for 3 generations. The caption said, "Thankful for new beginnings," with a diamond emoji. Dee saw it first. She seriously considered throwing her phone into the Savannah River. She did not show Catherine, but Catherine saw it. A friend from church texted her a screenshot with the message, "I am so sorry." Catherine stared at the photograph for a long time. She looked at her mother's necklace on another woman's neck. She looked at the foyer of her own home, being used as a backdrop for someone else's life. She did not scream. She did not cry. She went quiet in a way that frightened Dee more than screaming ever would have. "Cat," Dee said carefully, "talk to me." Catherine set the phone down. She looked at Dee with eyes that were perfectly clear and absolutely still. "Call Henry Calloway," Catherine said. "Tell him I am ready." The marriage validity challenge was dismissed on a Tuesday in December. The judge reviewed Catherine's birth certificate, her marriage certificate, and the supporting documentation and ruled that the name discrepancy was a clerical error with no bearing on the legal validity of the marriage. Catherine's temporary support was reinstated. The insurance was reactivated. The monitoring program resumed. Dee brought flowers to the legal aid office. "You tell that lawyer, James Park, that Dolores Washington says thank you, and she is bringing him a pound cake next week." For 5 days, Catherine breathed. The baby was stable. The money was flowing. The system, fragile and imperfect as it was working. Then Marcus Whitfield filed 2 motions simultaneously. The first was a motion to accelerate the divorce. Rick wanted this over by February. No more delays, no more hearings. Final decree, final settlement, done. The second was a custody preemption. Marcus argued that since Catherine was effectively homeless, living at a friend's house with no permanent residence, financially dependent on court-ordered support, and of, quote, questionable stability, unquote. Any child born during the pending divorce should be placed in Rick's primary physical custody pending a full evaluation. Rick was not just trying to take the money. He was trying to take the baby. Catherine read the motion at Dee's kitchen table. Her hands trembled. The document used words like unstable living environment and insufficient financial resources for child rearing, and the petitioner's superior capacity to provide. She called Henry. Her voice was calm, but underneath the calm was something made of iron. He wants my baby, Henry. I know. I read the filing. I have been patient. I have been quiet. I have done everything right, and he is still trying to take everything. Henry was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Then we stop waiting. The final hearing is in 6 weeks. We go to court with everything, the lease, the trust documents, the full chain of title, going back to 1742. Will it work? Catherine, when that judge sees what your family owns, Rick Mercer is not going to be taking anything from anyone ever again. I need a real lawyer, Henry, not just legal aid. I need someone who can stand in that courtroom and go toe-to-toe with Marcus Whitfield. You have me. You are a land title attorney. I am the land title attorney who has been preparing for this case for 3 years. Your father asked me to, and I do not intend to let him down." Catherine was quiet. Then she said, "My father really planned for this?" "Your father planned for the possibility. He hoped it would never come to this. But William Beaumont did not become a judge by hoping for the best. He became a judge by preparing for the worst." Catherine hung up the phone. She sat at the table for a long time, her hands on her belly, feeling the baby move. Then she stood up. She walked to the mirror in Dee's hallway. She looked at herself, a 48-year-old pregnant woman in borrowed clothes, in someone else's house with $2,200 and a family legacy. She was just beginning to understand. She straightened her shoulders. "Okay, little girl," she said to her belly. "Your grandfather built us a lifeboat. Let us go use it." The Chatham County Courthouse on the morning of January 14th was cold. Not Savannah cold, which is usually just a suggestion of winter, but genuinely cold, the kind of cold that gets into your bones and stays there. The live oaks outside the building were bare, their branches reaching up like hands grasping at a gray sky. Catherine arrived at 8:45. She was wearing a simple navy dress, the only professional outfit she still owned. Dee had pressed it the night before, with the kind of attention normally reserved for surgical instruments. Catherine walked slowly, one hand on her belly, one hand on Henry Calloway's arm. She was 8.5 months pregnant. The baby was due in 3 weeks. Dee walked behind them, carrying Catherine's bag, and wearing an expression that dared anyone in the building to say a single wrong word. They took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Family Court, Division B Judge Patricia Harden presiding. Rick arrived at 9 sharp with an entourage. Marcus Whitfield in a charcoal suit. 2 junior associates carrying matching leather briefcases. And Skylar Voss, who was wearing sunglasses indoors in January in a courthouse, and who took a seat in the gallery as if she were attending a fashion show. Dee leaned over to Catherine. She wore sunglasses inside. In January, in a courthouse. That tells you everything you need to know about that woman's judgment. Catherine almost smiled. Almost. Judge Harden entered. She was a woman in her late 50s with silver hair, reading glasses on a chain around her neck, and the expression of someone who had spent 25 years presiding over the worst behavior rich people were capable of and was no longer surprised by any of it. She sat down. She opened the file. She looked at Catherine's belly. She looked at Rick's legal team. She sighed. We are here for the final hearing in the matter of Mercer versus Mercer. Mr. Whitfield, you represent the petitioner. Please proceed. Marcus stood. He was polished. He was confident. He was a man who charged $800 an hour and earned every penny of it. Your Honor, Mr. Mercer seeks a dissolution based on irretrievable breakdown. The prenuptial agreement, signed in 1998, clearly delineates the financial settlement. Mrs. Mercer is entitled to the property on Tybee Island and monthly maintenance of $3,500 for 5 years. All business assets, including Mercer Atlantic Logistics, are separate property under the prenup's terms. Ms. Mercer made no financial contribution to the company. She has been a homemaker for 26 years. He paused for effect. Regarding custody of the unborn child, we respectfully request that the court consider Mr. Mercer's superior financial resources and stable living situation when making its determination. Judge Harden nodded, her face neutral. Mr. Calloway, I see you have entered an appearance for the respondent. I note from your filing that you are not a family law attorney. Henry stood. He buttoned his jacket, which was old but impeccably pressed. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet and precise. No, Your Honor. I am a land title attorney. I have practiced in this area for 45 years, and I believe this case is fundamentally about land. I am listening. Your Honor, Mr. Mercer has built his entire case on the premise that his wife contributed nothing to his empire. I am here to demonstrate that his wife is the empire. Marcus shot to his feet. Objection. This is a divorce proceeding, not a property dispute. Sit down, Mr. Whitfield, the judge said. I will determine what this proceeding is about. Mr. Calloway, continue. Henry opened his briefcase. He placed 3 documents on the table, each one protected in a clear archival sleeve. Your Honor, this is a land survey dated 1742, a colonial land grant under the Oglethorpe Charter, and the governing document of the Beaumont Family Trust. Together, they establish that the land on which Mercer Atlantic Logistics operates, Terminal East, the dry docks, the corporate headquarters, and all associated port facilities, has been owned by the Beaumont family since before the state of Georgia existed. The courtroom went still. Henry continued. Mr. Mercer does not own this land. He has never owned this land. He holds a 99-year ground lease from the Beaumont Family Trust, signed in 2003. That lease, which Mr. Mercer himself signed, contains a specific clause in Section 12, paragraph C. He read aloud, his voice clear enough to reach every corner of the room. The lease shall remain valid and in force so long as the lessee maintains a domestic union in good faith with a member of the Beaumont bloodline. In the event that said union is dissolved, or in the event that the lessee breaches the good faith covenant through infidelity or abandonment, the lease shall terminate and all reversionary interests shall return to the Beaumont Family Trust. Henry looked up from the document and directly at Rick. In plain English, Your Honor, the moment this divorce is final, Mr. Mercer loses the right to the land. His ships become trespassers. His building becomes an unauthorized structure on private property. His $2.1 billion company ceases to have a legal home. Rick stood up so fast his chair scraped backward with a screech. This is insane, Rick shouted. I bought that land. I have the deed. I built that company from nothing. You have a ground lease, Mr. Mercer, Henry said, still calm. Page 47, Section 12, Paragraph C. You signed it yourself. In 2003. Marcus was typing frantically on his laptop. His face was the color of old milk. Rick, Marcus whispered, loud enough for the courtroom to hear. He is right. The root title. It is not ours. It has never been ours. I never checked the root title. Rick turned on his lawyer with a look of pure horror. You never checked? Nobody checks colonial-era root titles, Rick. It is 2000, and apparently somebody does, Judge Harden interrupted, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. Mr. Whitfield, sit down. Mr. Mercer, sit down, both of you. They sat. At that moment, the courtroom doors opened. A woman walked in. She was tall, wearing a dark suit, and flanked by two assistants carrying file boxes. Judge Harden looked up. And you are? Diana Reeves, Your Honor, Assistant Attorney General for the State of Georgia, Real Property Division. We were notified of a dispute involving a colonial land grant within state jurisdiction and have an interest in the proceedings. She placed a document on the judge's bench. The state has reviewed the Beaumont Trust documents and confirms their validity. Furthermore, the state is filing a lien against Mercer Atlantic Logistics for unpaid ground rent. She turned to face the courtroom. The lease contains a good faith provision. The trust's legal team has provided evidence of infidelity by the lessee commencing approximately 3 years ago. Under the lease terms, the commercial rent waiver is retroactively voided for the period of the breach. Diana opened a file. Based on Mercer Atlantic's own publicly reported revenue, the state calculates back rent at 12% of gross income for 3 years. That amounts to approximately $78 million. Rick's face went gray, genuinely gray, the color of newsprint. I do not have $78 million in cash, Rick said. His voice was thin. Then the state will pursue equivalent assets. Effective 45 minutes ago, a temporary restraining order has been placed on all Mercer Atlantic accounts, pending resolution. Rick's phone buzzed in his pocket. Then again, then continuously, a vibration that would not stop. He pulled it out. Texts from his COO, texts from his CFO, texts from his bank. The accounts were frozen. The ships were dead in the water. His entire empire had been paused like a video someone had hit stop on. Then a text from Skylar in the gallery behind him. My credit card just got declined. What is happening? Rick looked at Catherine. She was sitting at the respondent's table. With her hands on her belly, she had not moved. She had not spoken. She was watching him with an expression that was not angry, not gleeful, not vindictive. It was patient. It was the expression of someone who has been waiting a very long time for the truth to arrive and is not surprised that it finally has. Here is something most people do not know, and it is worth knowing. When you buy property or sign a lease, there is a difference between the deed you hold and the root title, the original chain of ownership going back to the very first grant. Most people never check the root title. Most lawyers do not either. But the root title is the foundation that everything else stands on. If the root is flawed, everything built on top of it is vulnerable. If you own property, know your root title. It could save everything. Catherine spoke for the first time. Your Honor, may I address my husband? Judge Harden nodded. Catherine stood. She moved slowly, one hand supporting her belly, and walked to the center of the courtroom. She stopped about 6 feet from Rick. She looked at the man she had married 26 years ago, the man who had canceled her insurance, the man who had locked her out of her home, the man who had served her divorce papers at her baby shower and told his son she was insane. Rick, she said. Her voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the room. I sat in this marriage for 26 years. I listened to you close deals at the dinner table. I read every financial report you threw in the trash. I picked them up, and I read them, because I was curious, and because nobody who is invisible has any reason to hide what they are doing in front of an invisible person. She paused. I know about the underreported cargo weights at Terminal 4. I know about the third-party contract with your brother-in-law's company in Rotterdam that costs us 12% more than market rate. I know about the shell account in Bermuda that you told the board was closed in 2019, but which had a balance of $14 million as of last March. Rick's face was no longer gray. It was white. I could destroy you, Catherine said. I have every right to. You humiliated me at my baby shower. You canceled my insurance while I was carrying your child. You locked me out of my home and moved your girlfriend in. You tried to turn our son against me. You put another woman in my mother's necklace and let her post it on the internet. She put her hand on her belly. And then you tried to take this baby, our baby. The baby you told me at 3 in the morning was not yours, even though you know she is. The courtroom was absolutely silent. But I do not want to destroy you, Rick. I want to replace you. Rick blinked. Replace me? You will resign as CEO of Mercer Atlantic Logistics, effective immediately. You will transfer 51% of your voting shares to me. You will vacate the Savannah mansion within 30 days. You will acknowledge paternity of this child and pay full child support. You will retain a non-voting seat on the board and your annual salary. You cannot run a shipping company, Rick said. He was reaching for his old voice, the commanding one, but it came out cracked. You have never worked a day in your life, Catherine smiled. It was the first time she had smiled in that courtroom, and it was the kind of smile that rearranges a room. I have worked every single day of this marriage, Rick. I just was not paid for it. And I know your company better than you do, because you spent 26 years talking about it at dinner and never once considered the possibility that I was listening. She stepped closer. Or you can refuse, and I will let the state collect the $78 million, the lease will terminate, and your ships will have nowhere to dock. Mercer Atlantic will be worth nothing by the end of the week. Your choice. You have 60 seconds. From the gallery, Dee whispered to the woman sitting next to her, 59, 58. Judge Harden pressed her lips together in what might have been a suppressed smile. Rick looked at Marcus. Marcus shook his head slowly, the universal gesture of a lawyer who has run out of options. Rick looked at Diana Reeves. She was checking her watch. Rick looked at the judge. She was already writing the order. He looked at Catherine, his wife, the woman he had called wallpaper, the woman he had called a professional tea drinker, the woman whose family had owned the ground beneath his feet for 280 years while he strutted across it like he had built the earth itself. I will sign, Rick whispered. The transition was swift. By 9 the next morning, the press release had gone out. Richard Mercer steps down as CEO of Mercer Atlantic Logistics to pursue personal interests. Catherine Mercer appointed interim chairperson and majority shareholder. The stock did not crash. It rallied. The market liked the narrative. A company with a 280-year claim to its port land was a company with the most secure real estate position in the shipping industry. Investors who had been nervous about Mercer Atlantic's aggressive accounting suddenly felt very comfortable. Catherine walked into the Mercer Atlantic headquarters at 10 that morning. She was wearing a tailored navy suit that Dee had helped her find at a consignment shop. She was flanked by Henry Calloway and a young operations director she had headhunted from a competitor by phone the previous evening. She took the elevator to the top floor, Rick's floor. The executive assistants, who had spent years ignoring Catherine's phone calls when she tried to reach her husband, stood up nervously. Mrs. Mercer, Mr. Mercer's office still has his things. Have them boxed and sent to his new address. Schedule a meeting with department heads for 11. I want the quarterly projections and the Southampton manifest on my desk in 10 minutes. At 11, the department heads filed in. They were all men. They were all Rick's people. They looked at Catherine with the specific kind of skepticism that men reserve for women they have decided are temporary. Catherine did not sit down. She stood at the head of the table and opened a folder. Mr. Henderson, she looked at the CFO, you have been hedging our fuel costs against the Brent crude index, but you are over-leveraged in the Asian futures market. If the yen moves 2 points, we lose $4 million. Fix it by end of day. Henderson's mouth fell open. How did you... I read the reports. My husband threw them away. I picked them up. She turned to the VP of Operations. Mr. Davies, we are losing 12% efficiency at the Rotterdam terminal because of a third-party contract with my husband's brother-in-law. That contract is terminated as of today. Bring the unloading operations in-house. But the penalty clauses, the contract was signed under a conflict of interest. Mr. Calloway has already drafted the termination notice. It is clean. She looked around the room. This company has been run like a personal piggy bank for too long. That ends today. We are going to be lean, transparent, and profitable. If anyone has a problem taking direction from me, the door is right there. Otherwise, let us get to work. Nobody left. That evening, Rick drove to Skylar's apartment. He needed her. He needed someone to tell him this was temporary, that he would claw it back, that he was still the man he had been yesterday. Skylar did not open the door. Skylar, please, let me in. We can figure this out. Through the door, figure what out, Rick? You are unemployed, your accounts are frozen, and your wife just took your company. There is nothing to figure out. We still have each other. We had each other when you had a company. What we have now is a problem. Go away, Rick. I left my wife for you. The door opened 2 inches. Skylar looked at him. Through the gap, her eyes were flat. No, Rick. You left your wife because you thought you were a king and she was a peasant. Turns out you had it backwards. Do not call me. The door closed. Rick stood in the hallway alone. His phone had 47 unread messages. He did not read any of them. He walked to a bar down the street. He ordered bourbon. He sat on a stool and stared at his reflection in the mirror behind the bottles. The bartender, making conversation the way bartenders do, said, "Rough day?" Rick looked at his drink. I just found out I was a tenant my whole life and thought I was a king. Meanwhile, at the Mercer Atlantic offices, Catherine sat in the CEO chair. The desk was too big for her. The chair smelled like Rick's cologne. The view from the window showed the port, the river, the cranes moving containers like giant metal birds. She put her hand on her belly. The baby kicked. "We are going to be okay," Catherine said to the empty room. "All 3 of us." She was not just talking about herself and the baby. She was talking about the company, the 4,000 people who depended on it, the port that her family had stewarded for nearly 3 centuries. She opened her laptop and began to read the quarterly report, line by line, the way she had been reading them for years in secret, from the ones Rick tossed in the recycling bin. She knew this company. She had always known it. She had just been waiting for the world to catch up. 1 year later, the wind off the Savannah River was cold, but the kind of cold that cleans the air and sharpens the edges of everything. The port was bustling. Cranes moved. Trucks rolled. Ships waited in line like patient giants. But today the port had a new addition. A gleaming white cargo vessel sat at the main dock. On its bow, in gold letters, was the name, the Beaumont. It was the first hybrid electric cargo ship on the eastern seaboard, and it was Catherine Mercer's idea. Catherine stood at a podium on the dock. She was wearing a white, tailored suit. Her hair was cut shorter now, a sharp, confident style that framed her face. On her hip was a baby girl, 4 months old, with fat cheeks and curious eyes and a tiny sailor dress that Dee had ordered online and paid too much for. 300 people stood in the crowd. Dock workers and environmentalists and city council members and reporters. They were not the kind of people who used to attend Rick's events. The terrified executives in matching suits who clapped on command. These people were here because they wanted to be. Catherine spoke into the microphone. The baby grabbed for it. The crowd laughed. For over 20 years, Catherine said, this company measured success in quarterly profits and cut corners. We treated the ocean like a highway and our heritage like a footnote. She paused. She looked out at the ship. But a company, like a family, cannot stand if its foundation is rotten. Today we launch the first zero-emission vessel on the eastern seaboard, because stewardship is not about what you take. It is about what you leave behind. The applause was thunderous, genuine, the kind of sound that happens when people are witnessing something they believe in. Ethan stood beside his mother. He had graduated from UGA in the spring and was now working at Mercer Atlantic part-time, learning the business from the ground up. He looked proud. He looked like a young man who had figured out which parent to believe. Standing at the back of the crowd, behind the security fence, was a man in a beige jacket. Rick Mercer looked different. The expensive hair dye had grown out. He was wearing off-the-rack pants and a simple sweater. He was holding a coffee in a paper cup. He was not destitute. The settlement had left him enough to live quietly in a rented house in Thunderbolt. He had visitation with the baby every other weekend, which Catherine had agreed to because she believed, despite everything, that a daughter should know her father. Rick watched Catherine hold their daughter up to the crowd. The baby waved. The crowd cheered. Ethan saw his father. He walked to the back of the crowd. "Hey, Dad. Hey, son." They stood side by side for a moment, watching the ship. "She named the baby Elizabeth," Ethan said, "after Grandma Beaumont." Rick nodded. "It is a good name. You could come to Sunday dinner sometime. Dee cooks way too much. She would probably yell at you for the first hour, but she would feed you." Rick almost smiled. "Maybe." Ethan put a hand on his father's shoulder, then walked back toward his mother. Rick watched them go. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a photograph. It was old, creased at the corners, him and Catherine 26 years ago, sitting on the rocks at Tybee Island on their honeymoon. They looked happy. They looked like people who had no idea what was coming. On the back, in his own handwriting, he had added a note. "You are always the foundation. I was just too loud to hear it." He put the photograph away. He finished his coffee. He walked to his truck and drove home. He did not look back. He did not need to. He finally understood who she had always been. Here's the last thing worth saying, and it is the most important. Rick Mercer spent his entire life believing that power meant being the loudest voice in the room. He married a woman whose family had held the deed to the ground he stood on for 280 years, and he never once asked about her history, her family, or her worth. He confused her silence for emptiness. He confused her patience for weakness. He confused her kindness for surrender. He was wrong about all of it. Catherine did not fight with lawyers, or with screaming matches, or with social media posts. She fought with the one thing Rick could not buy, could not charm, and could not bully: the truth. And the truth, like the land itself, does not care how loud you are. It simply waits. So, the next time someone tells you they are just a housewife, the next time someone dismisses the quiet woman in the room, the next time you think that silence means someone has nothing to say, remember Catherine Mercer. Remember the Beaumont Trust. Remember the 280-year-old deed. And remember this. If you are going through something like what Catherine went through, hold on to three things. First, know your assets. Every account, every property, every title. Knowledge is not just power, it is protection. Second, never let anyone isolate you from the people who love you. Your D, your Henry, your people. They are your lifeline. Third, silence is not weakness. Patience is not surrender. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one holding all the cards. She just has not played them yet. If this story moved you, hit that like button. It helps more than you know. Subscribe and ring that notification bell, because next week we have a story about a woman who was left at the altar, only to discover that the groom's new bride was already married to her brother. You will not want to miss it. Until then, be careful who you underestimate. Closing credit. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful storytelling with real-life lessons. Every character, every twist, and every word was crafted with one purpose: to entertain you while leaving you with something valuable to carry long after the story ends. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And we will see you in the next one.